Oh, hello. My name is Mara, and welcome to Books Like Whoa. So, I've got another sort of like YouTube, Booktube perennial classic up for you guys today, and that is my YouTube Made Me Read It video. Yeah, these are all books that I don't think I would have read without YouTube. And without Booktube mostly. There's one of these that I got just generally from YouTube at large, but specifically most of these I would not have read without Booktube. And yeah, I was going through and trying to divide it into like, was it a success or not? And I'm very happy to say that I think all but a few of these I would consider to be successful instances of peer pressure leading to something good in my life as opposed to something bad. So yeah, let's get into this. And I'm gonna start with a few that I would not have read or would not have read when I did without having buddy read them. Okay, so first up is the buddy reads that I've been doing with Bethany from Beautifully Bookish Bethany, Leanna from Leanna's Library, and Amanda from The Naughty Librarian of the Witchland series. Now, I would say that this particular one, Sightwitch, is my favorite of the three that I've read, but overall it's a series that I'm enjoying and a series that having people to read it with me was really beneficial because the book Truthwitch, which was the first one that I kind of got into, I'm not sure if I would have pushed through it without having somebody there to kind of tell me like, keep going, it gets better, it gets clearer, even though I did end up really enjoying that book. So yeah, this was a very successful instance of buddy reading kind of helping me get through it. Perhaps in contrast to that, I have an instance where buddy reading kind of peer pressured me into keeping reading, and I'm not sure I'm glad I did, and that is The Passage by Justin Cronin. I recently did a buddy read of this with Dane Reeds and Lisbeth, and yeah, I can't say that any of us enjoyed this, and I feel like we all owe each other an apology for the buddy read having pressured us to keep reading it. This was a hyped book for a really long time that I'd heard a lot about, and yeah, it just didn't go that well for me, but I don't think I would have read it. I'm not sure if I ever would have actually gotten to it without Booktube, so I guess you gotta take the good with the bad. And then two other buddy reads, both of which were very successful. This one even more so, which was the Agatha Christie autobiography that me and Dane read earlier in the year. Super glad that I got, you know, kind of pushed into reading this and that we got to read that together. I think we both really enjoyed it. And then The Lies of Lamora by Scott Lynch. I read this with Leanna from Leanna's Library and Bethany at Beautifully Bookish Bethany. And again, I really enjoyed this and enjoyed having other people to kind of chat about it with. So, very successful buddy read instances. Let's go ahead and get the rest of the kind of more negative ones out of the way, and then we'll move into something a little bit more positive. A couple of books that I don't think I would have really heard of if it hadn't have been for Booktube. Like, that's really where I got the recommendation for them and did not enjoy. The first was Wintersong, which I recently DNF'd, and yeah, way too angsty for me. This is YA new adult fantasy, and it is high angst. It's written well enough, but like, I just could not get into the angstiness of this. So yeah, this was recommended to me by Booktube and didn't work out that great. But to be fair, there's a lot of mixed reviews on this, so I'm not entirely surprised by that. And then the other one that comes to mind is Nevernight by Jay Kristoff. I feel like that is a hugely hyped fantasy title here on Booktube, and yeah, the writing style itself is what I just could not get into in that particular book. I can definitely see why other people like it, but for me, writing style is a really important part of what I connect with in a book, and I just was not connecting with that particular book at all. And then I wanted to kind of throw in a couple of what I would think of as like middle of the road recommendations. So things that I liked well enough, like I'm glad that I read them, they were fine, but they weren't like awesome, that I got from Booktube. One, I read This Is Where You Belong by Melody Warnick, I think is her name, and I got that recommendation from a Book Olive, whose channel I really enjoy, and she was kind of talking about it as a book about how to love where you live, and since I recently moved to a new city, I listened to that as sort of like a refresher in my mind of like, oh yeah, this is how you sort of like settle in and start to feel at home. And yeah, I wouldn't say that it was anything like groundbreaking, revolutionary, whatever, but it was a good reminder, and I'm glad that I read it. It's not a book that I think will particularly stick with me, but the one thing I did get from it was the idea that you should go do things in your city with the kind of paradigm of, if if I had to tell somebody 3 things to do in my city, what would I recommend? And I think that's been kind of a fun approach for me as I've been trying to do different things around town. Yeah, it's been sort of like a nice sort of focusing lens of picking things to try out. So glad that I read it, but I wouldn't call it like an amazing booktube made me read it experience, but one that like I'm glad I got to. Another kind of like, it was good, I enjoyed it, was There's Someone in the House by Stephanie Perkins. I don't think that I would have even heard of that book. Like, I don't think I would have heard about that book at all, actually, if I hadn't heard of it from Booktube. And yeah, I think it sort of solidified to me that I really like YA mysteries, and I've been enjoying diving deeper into that. So yeah, I'm glad that I got that as a recommendation from Booktube. Wouldn't say it was like the best thing I ever read, but it was definitely an enjoyable book. And then finally, I've got 5 books here that I don't know if I would have read without YouTube, and I am absolutely so thankful that I did, because these are books that I really, really, really enjoyed. I'll start with the one that I probably liked least, but I still really enjoyed, which was A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. I don't know that I ever really would have gotten to this series if I hadn't heard it talked about so much, good and bad, here on Booktube. And I'm really glad I did, because I am enjoying diving deeper into her backlist. I'm excited to finish this series. I have the other 2 up on my shelf. And yeah, I'm glad that Booktube sort of pushed me into getting to this. Okay, and the rest of these are ones that I actually genuinely love and I'm like so thankful for. So the first is The Natural series by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This is a YA version of Criminal Minds, basically, and this was recommended to me from Ash Hart Books, whose channel I really enjoy, and she was raving about this whole series, and I thought, oh, that's a premise I really like, yeah, I'm into that. I'll get it from the library. Guys, this is like one of my all-time favorite YA series. I absolutely love this series. The second book in it is my favorite, but I think all 4 are really good, and I think that it sticks the landing really well. I highly recommend this. I absolutely love it, and I really don't know that I ever would have heard of this without Booktube. Next, Every Heart a Doorway by Shauna McGuire, and the entire Wayward Children series that is ongoing. Oh, I love this book, and I had heard of Shauna McGuire quite a bit, actually, but in the context of her urban fantasy, and I had not heard of these particular books, really, until I heard about them everywhere on Booktube, and everybody loving them, and the fact that it was, you know, a short book, something that was pretty easy to get through, really pushed me over the edge to going for it. I'm so glad I did, because I think this is a really unique fantasy series that is comprised of short novels, which I really appreciate, because I think that there should be, I think that that's a really positive thing for fantasy to explore with different like novellas and whatnot, as ways to kind of get beyond just these huge brick books that presuppose a certain type of world building and certain tropes. Anyway, we could get into a whole thing about that, but anyway, I think this is a really unique series, and I'm so thankful that Booktube pushed me to read this, because I've really enjoyed all 3 of the books that I've read, and I'm excited to see where the series continues. And then I first heard of The Hazel Wood by Melissa Albert from People's Most Anticipated Books for 2018 videos. I fell in love with how gorgeous the cover was, you know, was pretty intrigued by the premise, and decided to go ahead and buy it. I'm so glad I did. I know that this got ultimately some pretty mixed reviews. I honestly think because this was erroneously sold as YA, I think that this is much more of like a fantasy version of something like A Catcher in the Rye. That being said, there's, you know, plenty of room to disagree on that, but I'm so glad that I got pushed into reading this, because I really, really enjoyed it. I don't think it's a series that I'm actually going to continue with, because I actually quite liked the ending and liked thinking of this as a standalone. I may get to the rest of these at some point, but it's not a high priority for me, but I genuinely really, really loved this particular book. And then my last pick is one that I did not read because of Booktube, but I did read because of YouTube writ large. And this book literally changed my life, and so I feel like I have to include it, and that is Why We Get Fat by Gary Taubes. I read this because I saw a video that Raw Christie Beauty did about keto and about low carb, high fat, all that, back last September, so almost a year now, and she cited a bunch of resources, most of which are online resources, and you should like go look. I'll link her video below for you guys to see because she has a really good description box in there with a lot of resources. But one of the things she mentioned, it was a video sponsored by Audible, and this was the audiobook that she mentioned that they had read. And after I saw Gary Taubes being interviewed on a couple of different videos, I was really intrigued and went ahead and read this. And like I said, this kind of brought together some various threads that I had heard whispers of over the years and really helped me understand this and The Big Fat Surprise, which I ended up reading because of this book, really helped me understand the intellectual history about why we have certain recommendations and certain thoughts about the way that, that this part of our health works. And it helped me kind of have the confidence to say, like, I don't think that the way we've been thinking about this is right. And yeah, like I said, has changed my life. And I'm very thankful for this book. So thank you to Raw Beauty Christie. And yeah, I mean, maybe I would have gotten to this eventually, but like, yeah, 100% YouTube made me read this, and therefore YouTube kind of changed my life. I guess that's sort of a bold statement, but yeah, I think that's the conclusion that we're kind of coming to in the process of talking about this book. YouTube changed my life, guys. YouTube, it's bringing people together and changing lives every single day. So those are some of the books that YouTube/Booktube made me read. And like I said, when I was kind of coming up with a list of books that I felt like I could really honestly say I would not have read without YouTube/Booktube, I was surprised at how positive it was overall. I think sometimes when I'm casually thinking about it, I'm like, oh, I don't always get good recommendations for people. I mean, I've had actually, I think I had 13 books that I mentioned and only 3 that I would consider like not like disappointments basically. So that's like a pretty solid hit rate. So good job, Booktube. You're killing the game. Keep up the good work. So I think that that will do it for this video. If you enjoyed this video, if you would like and subscribe and follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined, I would really appreciate all of that. I am at Books Like Whoa pretty much everywhere. And if you ever want to know, if you ever want to get a book recommendation from me, if you want to have someone on YouTube make you read something, you can either watch my videos or you can follow me on Goodreads, because I do a pretty solid job of making sure that I at least give a rating to pretty much everything that I read. So feel free to stalk me on there if you're ever wondering what I am up to in terms of reading on a day-to-day basis. But I don't think I have anything I need to tell you guys, so I think we'll just call it a day here. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you're having a really lovely day. I hope you have a great weekend, and I will just talk to you soon. Bye!